This is IBM Museum. So I wanted to do a quick follow-up to running the system information tool on the Model 50Z in a previous video. And I was all set up. I moved the 50Z off the bench, brought up the items for another planned video, and really thought, well, I just better actually follow up on this in one area, just to kind of explain a little bit. And I've covered the, let's go through and I can run the system information tool just so I can show what I'm talking about right off the bat. And then we'll look at the other aspect that I'm wanting to bring up. And so we're getting into that patch version of the system information tool. I did provide a link to the original system information tool and that patched version there on the Ardent Tool website. So we get into the adapter information. And the Model 50Z is not really necessarily covered very well under the system information tool. None of the 8086 or 286 based CPU models of the PS2s are. However, it does cover even some of the models that are not PS2s, other IBM systems, and the interesting aspect here is that, and I made a comment on that previous video, it does show slots 1 through 8. And normally there's a extended CMOS register that contains a value for the number of microchannel slots, and I put quotations around that because there can be planar features that are listed as slots effectively here. But the Model 50Z, just like the 50 Model 50 that preceded it, has effectively 4 microchannel slots. And we've seen the support on Chet as far as this adapter section. It only supports any data in this area from a microchannel system. Since those microchannel slots are enumerated, the IBM models that are covered that are not microchannel, they just don't have any of this adapter information since it's not detected as being microchannel. We've seen that unlike the Model 35SX and effectively the 40SX, because it uses the same planar. It just listed it's not supported for determining the adapters. Now I do want to remember a little bit of this section starting out, that we have our slot 1, and it's starting the microchannel adapter slots in a human form here, identifying it from slot 1 through slot 8. And in slot 1, we do have that adapter ID, that memory adapter. In this case, extended memory adapter /A. And I'm even talking with Major Tom a good deal on the aspect of this having that 2 megabyte or 0 through 8 megabyte in parentheses. We found that kind of unusual, that it's identifying that 0 through 8 megabyte for this particular adapter ID. And there's other documentation out there, and we're trying to figure that out in a lot more detail. Is that really extraneous information, or does indeed this adapter support a 1 megabyte 30-pin SIM that IBM had that is relatively rare? Those work on the microchannel SCSI adapter that IBM called the Spock for the cache module, and normally it would have 2 of those. And the default configuration for Spock is it has 2 of the 256 kilobyte modules for 512 KB of cache for that SCSI bus. But you can find those SIMs, 2 of those SIMs, those 1 megabyte SIMs, and put them in for upgrading that cache to 2 megabyte. And there's even been, there's some information online. I can probably cover the IBM Spock SCSI adapter at a later point, that shows what that cache can do. If you upgrade the amount of cache, what that does. Now, the same SIMs are also can be used on the MUL 2526 and MUL 3026, since those also share a planar effectively. Normally, those systems came with a megabyte of RAM on the system planar in the form of 4 256 KB cache modules that could be replaced with those special IBM 1 megabyte SIMs to give you 4 megabyte on the planar. And that way you didn't have to have so much on the adapter side to increase that memory to like a maximum of the 16 megabytes for the system that a 286 CPU or 386SX CPU is able to support maximum. And I did have that previous video showing the modules, the memory adapters that I just stuffed in my model 3286. One adapter added additional 3 megabyte to the 1 megabyte that was already on the planar, and the second adapter added the remaining 12 megabyte to hit that maximum, that system maximum of 16 megabyte. And I commented at the time that it'd be interesting if I didn't have to use that 3 megabyte adapter, that I could have 4 megabyte right on the planar of the PS2 MUL 3286, and just having that second adapter of the remaining 12 megabyte, and or a style like it. And I even pondered of the modification that I could do, sort of an interposer of circuit boards that went in those SIM slots and modified it to the format where I could use a set of 4 conventional 1 megabyte SIMs. And I say that because the pinout of those IBM 30-pin SIMs is different from a conventional 1 megabyte SIMs. It has a parity detect, much the same as they use for the 72-pin SIMs. And you only had the 3 different types of those 30-pin modules, where you had a 256 KB module, you had a 512 KB module, and that was good in the cases where you could go through and have those on the MUL 50 and MUL 60, the original MUL 50 with the 30-pin SIM, and you could effectively have double the memory that those 256 kilobyte SIMs had. Now the 512 KB SIMs were rare, but they weren't as rare as the 1 megabyte IBM modules. And there's out there, but typically they're pretty pricey, just based on that rarity, that uncommonness. And there's even a page on how to modify those conventional SIM, 1 megabyte SIM, to behave like an IBM SIM. And I did this back in the day, and there's some certain constraints there because the Model 3286 planar, in addition, it's shared planar to the PS2 MUL 25286, is very picky. You have the conventional SIM modules at that 1 megabyte size. They do have to be parity, and the number of chips on the module can make a dramatic difference as well. You have to modify the 9-chip version for that MUL 3286 planar to like it. If you modify a 3-chip version of a SIM that has the capacity of 1 megabyte, the planar just doesn't like it. So the one thing we want to remember here for this side of things is that in that slot 1 we have that F7FE adapter ID. and then no adapter in slot 2, no adapter in slot 3. In slot 4, we have that DF9F, and that's just that adapter that adapts the microchannel bus to that DBA ESDI drive. So it's actually where the microchannel adapter ID exists on the hard drive controller itself. All the riser is for that hard drive is just wiring to the hard drive. And but just remembering that arrangement of the slots, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, the effective real slots on the Model 50 or 50Z, it having a total of 4 slots, not a total of 8. Now, the point I wanted to bring up is the PS2 Model 50, and that's carried over to the Model 50Z as well. They are a little bit more of what's treated as a stripped down microchannel configuration. That microchannel configuration is held in a regular CMOS area, and there's not any extended CMOS area for that microchannel configuration if it were larger, if it were more adapters. That space in the regular CMOS area is only able to cover the system configuration and space for how 4 adapters would be configured. And the Model 60 had that extra CMOS, extended CMOS space because it has the ability on the Model 60. That's a tower version of the Model 50. And it has the ability for 8 adapters, just like it's shown on the screen here. So it does have that extended CMOS area. So that's how the Model 50 and 60 differ, despite being based on the same CPU. The Model 50 is considered to be the desktop version. The Model 60 is considered to be the tower version, of course. More expansion areas, more drive bay locations on the system. And that relationship is shared between the Model 70 and Model 80. The Model 70 is based on the 386DX normally when it was introduced, and that is the desktop version. And the Model 80, more space, more adapter slots, is the tower version. Also initially, based on the 386DX CPU. And those models, the Model 70 and the Model 80, even though the Model 70 only has the ability for 4 adapter locations, just like the Model 50, with those being 32-bit in that case, it has the full extended CMOS area for microchannel. They put it on that higher end system with the 386DX CPU, but didn't have it on the 286 version of the Model 50. So let's go ahead, and we just initially got into the system information tool, and I went through, and as you can see with my identifier over there, I have UNPC on the PS2 Model 50 and 50Z. And I have the start of the first page, and this is spread out over a few pages. I could have scanned these in and done optical character recognition and got them on some sort of like web page so I could browse through. But it's just a quick video. It's running a little bit late. I wanted to push through to get the video out so I can effectively move on with the other videos that I do have planned. So we're going to go into where I install the UNPC program. That's for the Undocumented PC book, the software that is included with that book. And I installed it into a directory location on the system. We've gone over the UNPC in prior videos. And I'll show the one factor I touched on before that is valuable from the aspect of that software. Now, I am working from, and unless you have the actual UNPC book, you'll just have to follow along with what I'm describing. This is the first edition, And I know that there's, when I advertise this, there's people that went through, viewers that went through and picked up this book, um, and really like seeing some of the details because the author, Frank Gilluwe, and I learned the pronunciation from him, went through and he's laid out all the aspects of how these systems can be, the hidden features basically, or in a sense, an undocumented areas of the PC. Now that does have a second edition, and of course a different ISBN that I've gone over, and I've pointed out that I do have, a signed version of my UNPC second edition. And when I opened this up on camera before we had the bug, I thought it was just interesting for I'm going through and debugging or squashing the bug as I went through and covered the book. But I wanted to kind of give page numbers for those that do have the book. In the first edition, I'm referencing from page 758, and on the second edition, I'm referencing from page 908. And certainly I can include the ISBN numbers of these books once again in the video description. Now, since I'm in the directory, let's go ahead and I'm going through and spending a lot of time explaining what I'm trying to do, and this is normally very quick for what I'm going to show. So in this case, we're going down to the system information, and I wish I had a little bit of more of like a mouse pointer or a way to go through and show what text I'm looking at in particular here. We're going down to the View CMOS RAM Contents. Okay. And it just takes a little bit of time to read the CMOS memory information, then it loads a text file. And Frank Gilluwe has identified, he's going with a lot of generic descriptions for these different registers. He can't go in a lot of detail in the software. In the book, he splits it up, and I'll go through and read the aspects I want to touch on. So we've seen this before. I've gone through briefly where I'll probably have to look at the screen behind me just to go through to where I don't see too much lag. Now, the aspect that I addressed before was that getting all the way down to the 32 hex offset, and that identifying as the date century byte, and then in parentheses MCA checksum low. We determined before that is the on a non-PS2 system, and we even saw this in the NCR models I featured on video. They followed the IBM lead. They moved that location. But so normally non-PS2s or even the microchannel systems that follow the IBM lead, it is no longer in that offset, the 32 hex register for the century byte. We've seen that's been moved down to the offset 37 that's listed as vendor specific. I have that kind of in the center of the screen, and it has the value of 20 in there, and that's correct in this instance because it is the century byte value is 20, being that it's the year 2021. So that's the one thing that's modified with the PS2 systems, and IBM uses this even in the non-microchannel versions. And that is very that's relevant to the area that if you if you get if you replace the CMOS ROM or the CMOS RAM module, that Dallas DS 1287 or DS 1387 that is on some of the PS2s, that if you get some of the version of the real-time clock module replacement, it doesn't work correctly because it works with that century byte location, and it doesn't understand that that's a place on the IBM system that keeps track of the memory, the size of the memory. So you have a system that won't hold configuration, always tells you that memory is corrupted or it's not identifying the memory size correctly. Well, you just maybe need to modify or find a compatible module that works with that, allowing that century byte location at 37 hex instead of 32. Now I'm going to look a little bit above this for the area that I want to show. We're going to scroll to where the very top of this, and we start with the 19 hex location in regular CMOS. Okay, and we see that has a value in that area, and it's identified. Frank Gilluwe identifies that as hard disk 0 extended type in the software, but in his book he lists non-MCA systems, drive type byte type 16 to 255 when high nibble of hard disk type register 12 hex is F hex. C CMOS register 12 hex. And I do have that page shown over on the right there. Probably pretty small writing to effectively read unless you have a really big screen and can see it. I'm just doing that for demonstration of what I'm covering. What that means is just a clone system to the IBM models. Use that byte location for storing what the hard drive type was. And it used a combination of that register and another one for that detail. And it has below that, and it's probably just readable just under that UNPC text that I have in that image. MCA systems. This register holds the adapter card ID for card slot 0. Okay, now in this case, and a lot of time when you addressed it in software, they actually enumerated the slots as being 0 through 7. If you had 8 microchannel adapter slots, you had where the first slot was effectively 0 in the computer-based indexing, and your last or your highest numbered slot was 7. If you had a system that had 7 or it's going to be 8 microchannel slots. And as I spoke of before, there are some planar features that were identified as slots as well. So you would have maybe 5, I'm just going with the number, 5 physical slots, and then what would be normally the 6th microchannel adapter slot would be a planar resource like SCSI. Something in that form. And you even had where some of the systems, like we looked at the Model 85, PS2 Model 85, having a bunch of microchannel adapter slots, but also having the SCSI bus or SCSI controller implemented on the planar, and using it that way. And so there were adaptations that even above 8 microchannel slots were used. So I'm just mentioning that as it's identifying in the book as adapter card ID for card slot 0, and meaning the human interpretation would be our slot number 1. And remember from that earlier view on SIT, the contents of that register at 19 hex is FE, and then in the I can continue reading for the 1A register, and that's 1A hex, which is the next step after 19 hex. So on MCA systems, this register holds the adapter card ID for card slot 0, and in effect, that's what would be considered the lower ordered bytes, or it's with 19 hex and 1A hex combined, that those registers to be the adapter that's in slot number 1. And so we have that FEF7, and that's actually, I guess, inverted. The 1A hex is the high order bytes, the 19 hex register being the low order bytes. So that adapter ID being effectively F7FE. And then there's further text to this in the book that says, this byte is duplicated in extended MCA CMOS register 0. Refer to port 76 hex register 0 for details. And again, for the register 1A hex, we have this byte is duplicated in extended MCA CMOS register 1. Refer to port 76 hex register 1 for details. What that means is that extended CMOS area, where the other microchannel models, it also has the information about the adapter IDs in that extended microchannel CMOS area. And the MAL 50 and 50Z, they do not have that space, and I'll show that in a moment. So continuing on for the 1B hex register, the text there, and we see the value of FF as well as in the 1C hex register. We see that also as FF, is the value that's held in that register. So for the microchannel systems, this register holds the adapter card ID for card slot 1. And then they continue on about this byte is duplicated in the extended microchannel CMOS register 23 hex, blah, 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 blah. So this is effectively that in human terms in slot 2. And being that the 1B hex and 1C hex register holding the value of that microchannel adapter in slot 2 being FFFF, and that's no adapter present. And I think we saw that in SID on how it labels the adapter is no adapter present, but it has that FFFF in as the register contents. And the same thing is duplicated for that 1D hex and 1E hex, the FFFF. And that in human terms is slot number 3. And we can continue in the booklet, same format, that it ultimately means there's no adapter also in our slot 3. If we look further along for the 1F and the following register of 20 hex, and that's again that hexadecimal notation for numbering things. Those are the registers that contain for a human readable adapter slot 4. So it actually has the contents of the 9F, DF, or inverted as it is, the high order and low order bytes, DF, 9F. Okay, so that is that hard drive, that DBA ESDI hard drive ID for slot number 4. Now, when we get into the 21 or 21 hex, those registers 22 hex, 23 hex, 24 hex, 25 hex, the values in there are actually what the it goes back to the what's called the POS data of how that adapter is configured, being listed in those locations, and it goes back to where 21 and hex and 22 hex are actually talking about that adapter slot 0 again, or the first adapter of the system. The POS data being in there. It is referenced. You can read ahead if you have the book. That's just the storage and the regular CMOS of that POS data to configure the adapter. And I want to get in. Let's read for 2.1 hex because I want to. Okay, it says MCA systems or microchannel systems. This holds the programmable option select, POS, configuration byte 2 to be sent to the adapter card slot 0, and it is duplicated in extended CMOS, extended MCA CMOS register 3. So we're back to putting those values, they're duplicated in that extended CMOS area if it's present. But these are the values, and they're held in this non-volatile RAM in CMOS, be it that Dallas module or some other chip that holds that. Even in the case of the 50 and 50Z, I think that even is where it has that Motorola chip in there. That original chip that was on the IBM AT, and the system, when it's starting up, it takes the values out of this non-volatile RAM area, and that's the information it sends to the adapter. Since that adapter does not hold the value of how it's configured, it knows its adapter ID, but it says, okay, the adapter in slot 1, here's your configuration. And that's how that microchannel bus does in a sense, the plug and play, or knows the adapter knows how it's configured from the system, even though it doesn't have jumpers or anything else on the adapter used to configure it. And the notion of that reference diskette in the microchannel system, it's able to see conflicts in resources and can identify those and can warn you when you run the reference diskette. Hey, this has a conflict. It's got the asterisk for that setting when you run the reference diskette, and then when it goes through and auto configures, it chooses an alternate configuration for that adapter, different range of I/O ports or different range of IRQ. That's how microchannel works. I do have, and I mean, that's more the details of the, even though it doesn't necessarily get on how those are configured in software, but this is the Microchannel Architecture Handbook. And I've even got 2 of these books, and it shows Chet, Heath, and Winn L. Rosch as the authors. And Chet Heath was the engineer at IBM that basically came up with the idea, him and his team, of microchannel and how it would be implemented on a system. And, just all the design details in this book. And so he's kind of the creator of that microchannel system, and had the 286 base system that he named the Delmarva machine, That was their initial prototype for how Microchannel would work on the system. So I'm going to look and see. We're coming up on 35 minutes of recording time. I just planned to do a brief video, and I just had to show this of what I felt was, a good insight into things. But I'm showing that, in this regular CMOS area, I mean, other systems microchannel systems have this and use this for the adapters in slots 1 through 4, but they also duplicate that in that extended CMOS area. And in particular, let's go through and now that I've kind of shown the area of the regular CMOS, we can go through and scroll down. We're going back through all that territory I talked about with the century byte. Here's an additional area of the CMOS, and it's marking that as vendor specific for a lot of these entries. We're seeing just the value of 0.2 in these areas for a lot of the registers. There is some information in there that are populated. I'd even have to read through. I put down the second edition. Let me pick up the first edition. I'm making sure I'm not bumping my mic. Okay, and some of that's the checksums for like register 3F hex. And it says, for instance, here on, and this is some of the port detail, port 74 hex, most MCA systems contain an additional 2K CMOS RAM memory area to access this memory, blah, blah, and how it goes through and how you can read that extended microchannel CMOS. And let's get down to it. Go through all of this. Okay. So we get to the area, and Frank Gilluwe has gone through, and since it was UNPC software detected that it was a microchannel system, it has gone through and says, hey, I'm going to show this microchannel extended CMOS area as well. This 2 KB of RAM that a microchannel system can use to show the configuration. Now, on the MAL 50 and 50Z, it's just false values. It's just shown in 0 zeros. If you're able to run this on a system that had that extended CMOS area, these would have the duplicate values, like from the beginning of the which adapter was in slot 1. And that might be handy for me to pull out that MAL 60 again, and I have it close at hand, and put in the same adapter for that slot 1, since that's a common memory adapter. I can just bring this one over from the 50Z, put it in the MAL 60 for running this, just to show that duplication with this area, because this extended CMOS area is just, it's vacant. It's not even present on the MAL 50 and 50Z. All it has is these placeholder values within the 00 or 01 or 02 for the different banks, effectively, of that space, 03. And it would probably go through to for all that 2 KB and just have incrementing values for areas of that. It's not physically present, so we're just getting phantom values basically on this, what the system is trying to read from those areas. Now at the end of in the, get down to where I can have it kind of the center of the screen. So there is a, if you look through over on the leftmost column, there's identification of the 0180, and that's in hexadecimal values. And then what it does is it goes over from the right of that, and it shows for, the 1 or 0180, 0181, 0182, just progressing further right in increments all the way up to the 018F hex register. And that 018F hex register, what that does in extended CMOS on the microchannel malls that have it, that is the location that it holds the number of slots that are on that system. So with a Mall 60 that has an extended MCA CMOS, it would show the value of 8 in there. That there's 8 microchannel slots on that unit. And so for the Mall 50 and 50Z, since it doesn't have the extended CMOS area, it doesn't know the amount of slots that are on the system. And that's why that system information tool just says, hey, I give up. It's got 8 microchannel adapters. It doesn't know the true number, that there's only 4, just because it's going through and reading this value that's held in the register, and that being 01, and at least it's aware enough to say 01, that it doesn't make sense that the system has only one adapter present. And it is reading the slots 1 through 4, those adapters that are in there, and presenting the data within set from the adapter ID of gain of that area, at least of the regular CMOS contents. At least that's not failing. Otherwise, on the Mall 50 and 50Z, for the system information tool only looking to extended CMOS to figure out what the adapter ID and those POS bytes and things like that are. So SIT does recognize systems with just the regular CMOS not having that extra microchannel area as well. But, excuse me, normally I would have a cough button on my mic, and since I've gone to the wireless mic, I do not. But the, and I've been talking a long time, and that's the reason my voice is going like this, too. And I'm going to wrap this up very soon, so just not much longer of watching. But so we see, the system information tool, and it does cover non-microchannel malls, and that's why it probably deals a little bit with just that regular CMOS area, in addition to the extended CMOS area if it's present for reading those higher numbered values and figuring out those defined systems to say, oh yes, I know model 80, and I can go through and where it identifies that better. And that's probably a hard-coded value for the malls that it is able to cover. But I just wanted to point that out of how the Mall 50 and Mall 50Z are a little bit more stripped down, in that they don't have that extra 2 KB of what's referred to as a microchannel extended CMOS area. That is not present on the systems to work with. So if you thought that this was an informative video for all that, just a simple concept I'm trying to do, and passing, probably getting up to video that's going to be a little bit longer than 45 minutes. Enjoyed this video, click on that like button. And if you identify particular sections, I've gone through and I've tried to explain and stumbled upon certain areas. If you don't think I explained it correctly or whatever else, you know, make a comment. Again, with my, I need that cough button on my, to come up with a wireless mic that's got a cough button that I can mute that stuff or go through and, I guess if I am on my toes, I could go through and pause the video a little bit more and cough and then come back. But, so, you know, click on that like button if you enjoy the content. There's going to be a lot of stuff like this. I thought before I clear the 50Z off the table, and this even brings up that prospect of a Mul 60 video. Bring the Mul 60 back and let's look through the same details and show where that is, show what the contents of the of this 018F register is, to show the number of microchannel slots. And it's kind of cool to me. I do have, I'll go through and I'll link a page in the video description as well that I went through and I created some routines, basically little software utilities, and those are in BASIC, or sometimes I have them in assembly language, of the little things that you can run on the systems to determine if it's a microchannel system. And the one routine I did for that, what's called check MCA, is, and what I meant for that is check if it's a microchannel system. And the system, you know, with that routine can identify, hey, yes, this is a microchannel system, ahead of even determining adapter IDs or anything else about the system. Just determines that basic of whether the system has a microchannel bus. And the end of that routine I have where it goes through and interrogates the system. Okay, you are a microchannel system. How many slots do you have on the system? And that's just basically a value writing to which register you want access to, ports, IO ports 74 hex and 75 hex, and then reading port 76 hex back to what the system reports for the number of microchannel slots. And this, those IO registers are a little bit associated with how the microchannel systems are, that setup process as well, whether it's a planar or adapter resource and things like that, that controls those areas. But that's one of the things that that basic routine that I'll link in, you know, does as well for showing the number of slots on the system, microchannel slots. So there's going to be some off-the-wall content like this on the channel. If you like this and haven't subscribed already, subscribe, and you'll see this sort of content. Me going through a long period of time and just explaining away on some of the concepts. And, you know, by all means, I look forward to those comments if you want to leave them on this video. But that is all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.